Both Liftoff and TRYP FPV are leading FPV simulators with many pilots training daily on both. If you want to acquire one but you don't know which one to choose, you have come to the right place. I personally own both simulators and have about over 80 hours in Liftoff and a little bit under 10 hours in TRYP FPV. That's not because I don't like TRYP FPV, but I started with Liftoff and alongside my journey in FPV later on I acquired TRYP FPV and other simulators. So this will be a non-sponsor and non-affiliate video, and I'll try to help you decide which FPV simulator out of those two will be better for you. So the Liftoff appeared around 2015 for the first time and was reworked and released on Steam about in 2018. It's available for Windows PC and Mac computers, and I think on Linux, Xbox and PlayStation as well if I'm not wrong. The overall review of Liftoff is very positive and is one of the most known and purchased FPV simulator of all time. On the other side, the TRYP FPV is relatively new. If I'm not wrong, it was released somewhere in 2022. So what do I think about Liftoff? Well, it does have a good content across all the maps, and it has one very massive and unique workshop where you can build your own drone or grab one already made from the Steam community. As well, if you do have the DJI FPV drone, you can find it there in Liftoff as an add-on, and it's free. And also what I love is that Liftoff runs very decently on Mac computers. So comparing Liftoff with TRYP FPV in terms of performance, Liftoff does require much less graphic resources to run and runs much more smoothly. Liftoff also has been a very good simulator to start freestyle and even racing into, but the racing is not my favorite in Liftoff, neither in TRYP FPV. But now, because we're talking about Liftoff, why I think this? Well, the drone is a little bit drifty, so this is a downside of Liftoff simulator. So basically every drone you fly there, if you want to take sharp corners, you will feel that the drone will drift way too much, more than it should. And yet another downside, if we are still on this subject about Liftoff, what I have noticed is that, just to mention in the physics terms, the gravitational acceleration is a little bit off. So basically when you release a throttle, it takes too long to fall down, basically. So the drone, when you fly there, the FPV drone feels a little bit floaty. But this is not an issue with Liftoff simulator, because basically all kind of FPV simulators have some downsides related to game physics, throttle management, drone dynamics and so on. But what do I think about TRYP FPV? Well, TRYP FPV is hyper realistic, and as in terms of content, it has only 4 maps, but every map is very massive and are miles wide with a huge variety of content. It has cars, motorbikes, hot air balloons, flying airplanes, parachutes, quad bikes, skis, and so much more engaging content to train flying FPV drones under most circumstances. The TRYP FPV simulator has a way much better graphic than the Liftoff, but at the same time the resources to run the simulator are much higher. So if you have a basic Mac computer, for example, you will struggle to get the performance you need in TRYP FPV, while on the same side in Liftoff you won't have issues getting the required performance. But TRYP FPV is also fantastic for long-range flights, so if you're the kind of guy who likes to create cinematic content flying a drone long range, this is actually the best simulators across every single simulator existent when we relate to long-range flights. Also, TRYP FPV, the same as Liftoff simulator, both of them are well compatible with a wide variety of FPV radio controllers. So with TRYP FPV, the simulator can be obsessive to train, practice and spend time on it when outdoors is raining. For instance, you can't get bored in TRYP FPV. But as for downsides about TRYP FPV is that the drone mechanics and physics are relatively poor. I mean, they are not poor, but they are definitely below the Liftoff simulator. So what about the pricing and add-ons? Liftoff has quite a few add-ons, while on the other side TRYP FPV doesn't. Liftoff is way much more expensive, so with all the add-ons we can expect double the price of TRYP FPV. So let's talk a little bit about content. TRYP FPV, as we mentioned, has fewer maps, only 4, but has a massive amount of content, whereas Liftoff has more maps but less content. Liftoff is a clear winner if you're looking into flying specific drones or creating your own drone map or map in workshop. Yes, basically in Liftoff you can create your own map. But overall in Liftoff we can find about 17 maps at the time of making this video. What I also love about Liftoff is the fact that you have a multiplayer option. So if you log in or create an account with them, you can play and race with other players. Not only race, but you do have some freestyle choices in some maps with other players. On the other side, TRYP FPV doesn't have at all any kind of multiplayer options. What about which simulator is more realistic, but not in terms of graphic, but of how you control the drone, how you crash the drone. If you crash the drone in TRYP FPV, the drone will just bounce off. That's it. It's nothing spectacular, but in Liftoff, if you crash the drone applies some effects on crashing. And if you disable the God mode from Liftoff, basically you can damage your drone and the drone will fly more chaotically. So in terms of racing, well, I'm not the kind of racing guy, but I tried both of them racing. What I can say is that Liftoff has better racing options than TRYP FPV, and you can race against AI like bots or online against other players. In TRYP FPV, racings are kind of more like challenges, from easy to very hard, something like that. So which one do I actually recommend on the overall experience? Liftoff was my first quoting love simulator, and I continued training in it quite often. It actually, across all the simulators, has the most number of hours, even if I managed to acquire the other simulators much later in my FPV journey. But although it has limited content and may have its downsides, the fact that you have a workshop for your drone and create your own map weighs a lot. So I do recommend Liftoff to anyone who is new at flying FPV to learn, train and practice for flying freestyle and racing. So many FPV drone pilots and myself started with Liftoff and we're just fine now flying FPV drones. But TRYP FPV also caught my attention with the amount of content you can find when flying a drone or on some massive maps. Basically, you don't even know what to do next. There are so many things you can do in TRYP FPV. And yeah, one more mention. If you actually find yourself in one corner of the map, you can teleport your drone to any point of the map in TRYP FPV just by going to the map and right click on it, something like that. And I always feel relaxed when flying in TRYP FPV, and I am up for many challenges to strengthen my FPV abilities. I will recommend TRYP FPV if you have primary experience in flying FPV drones and you're just looking for more challenges, you want to practice for many hours or occupy your time and you cannot take your quad out. It is also a very good simulator if you're looking to train in multiple scenarios you cannot find on any other FPV simulators like skiing and gliding, hot air balloons and so on. So an overall overview. Liftoff has better game physics, mechanics, drone management than TRYP FPV. TRYP FPV is a little bit below that. It doesn't mean you can go wrong with it. The content you can find on TRYP FPV is much more than you can find on Liftoff. But on TRYP FPV you cannot edit drones. I mean, you have some options to edit drones, but they are basically by far not like what Liftoff can offer. So this is it. I hope this comparison has been helpful to you. If you're interested, I do have an article comparing both simulators side by side in depth, way much more in depth than this video, and I do recommend you reading it if you're looking for more insight about both simulators. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you around.